So welcome, everybody. My name is Roger Berkowitz, and I'm thrilled to be here at the CEU. I'm from Bard College, and I run the Hannah Arendt Center at Bard College and the Hannah Arendt Humanities Network of the Open Society University Network. We're all getting used to all the different labels and different organizations, but it's really a pleasure to be here. The Hannah Arendt Humanities Network, as part of OSUN, has decided to offer an annual award in honor of Yehuda Elkana. And this is something that is very exciting. I personally, I have to admit, never met and didn't know Yehuda Elkana as much as I would have liked to, the more I've learned about him. One of the things I learned about him from a movie that you're going to see a part of in a little bit is that he loved to cook, and not only loved to cook, but loved to host people and bring new people into his world, and cook for often 20 or 30 people at his home and make it a name. And when I was watching it and learning about him, I thought about the idea of hospitality, of Xenia from the Odyssey or from the Greeks. And it's just also just personal. My doctoral advisor, Philippe Nonet, the last thing he wrote before he died last year was a cookbook. And I saw also that Yehuda had written a cookbook, Yehuda's Tables, which struck me as deeply meaningful. And so coming out of this pandemic, where we've been trying to get a global university network off the ground amidst a global pandemic, it's really a pleasure to have some of you here today in person. I think for many of us, this is probably our first public lecture since the pandemic, and just really happy to be here. I want to thank a few people who have made this possible. Shalini Randera from Institute for Wissenschaft Dimension, who's also been the rector there and is now going to become the rector and president here at CEU. And it was Shalini, along with Liviu Matai, the provost here at CEU, myself, and Ivan Krastev, who originally met and were the committee that put together this award in honor of Yehuda Elkana. From everything I've learned about him, and so I want to thank Ivan, Liviu, and Shalini for working with me to put this together. Also, Jakob First and Sylvia Cardos from EWM and CEU, who were amazing, really heroic at helping to put something together like this amidst a pandemic with changing rules, travel restrictions, and everything else that we've had to deal with. So I want to thank them all for that. You'll learn a lot about Yehuda in a little bit, but just a little bit. He was the third president and rector of the CEU, the Central European University, from 1999 to 2009. He was an Auschwitz survivor. He was a permanent fellow at the Wissenschaftskolleg in Berlin. And his last book and project was a book developing an idea of the university in the 21st century, Die Universität im 21. Jahrhundert für eine neue Einheit von Lehre, Forschung und Gesellschaft, the university in the 21st century for a new unity of teaching, research, and society. And it strikes me as incredibly apt that the Open Society University Network is choosing to create an award in his honor. The OSUN network, the Open Society University Network, which was announced about a year and a half ago by George Soros, imagines itself as a liberal arts, as a network to promote the engaged liberal arts throughout the world, to bring the liberal arts tradition of critical thinking and engaged citizenship into universities all over the world, often where that tradition of learning and studying has not solidified itself. The Hannah Arendt Humanities Network, as part of OSUN, is dedicated to bringing humanities interested scholars from currently over 38 institutions in the OSIN network together to talk about the story of what it means to be human in our age. In this event, the first in-person event of the Hannah Arendt Humanities Network, we have people from the Brock University in Bangladesh, the Ashesi University in Ghana, the University in Belgrade, Serbia, the American University of Central Asia, Birkbeck University in London, Bard College, New York, and CEU. And I think this is just a taste in the beginning of what the Open Society University Network can be, to bring people from all these different countries, different perspectives together, in our case, to talk about the humanities. It seems to me that idea of bringing people together, bringing new people together, bringing new people to the table to talk, is very much what Yehuda Elkana was about. So I'm thrilled to be inaugurating this award in his honor. We're going to start today by seeing an excerpt from a film called Yahudah, which was directed by the first recipient of the Yehuda Elkana Prize, Helga Nowotny. And we're going to show that now.
First time I met him was together with 200 students as an undergraduate student when he gave the amazing class on the history of ideas in the West, which was certainly one of the most impressive and most challenging moments I ever had as a student, and I still keep it in my memory.
The first impression was that he was different than any other teacher I ever had before, because he was a teacher involved in the interest and even in the fantasies of the students. So, you know, he related to each of us personally, was able to detect what the intellectual interest was and to cater to it. I mean, just to give you a concrete example, he would come to the seminar every week loaded with books that he brought from his private library, and each of the students, when he or she expressed a desire for a book, you know, Yehuda obviously had it, and he brought it and gave it to us.
I remember the first occasion when he really impressed me. So he was already on the job. He was president and rector at CU, and we had a meeting to discuss with other colleagues to discuss I don't even remember what the issue was, but it was a rather difficult issue, and he decided that we go one way, and I said that is not possible. That is against our regulations, is not the right thing to do. My advice is don't do it that way. And he said, I don't care what you say, it doesn't make any sense, so we go ahead. Fine, so I had no choice but to accept that. We didn't know each other. That could have been the first encounter, in a professional setting. Then a couple of days later, he realized, I don't know how, that he was wrong and I was right. So he sent an email to everybody who attended that meeting saying, well, I realized that Liviu is right and I was wrong and I want to apologize for that. So I was very impressed by that gesture, and that is, when he bought me, let's say so.
On the same day when I met him during the day, he immediately invited me for a dinner that he gave for a composer in the Institute of Advanced Study. And usually when you get invitations like this for dinner, dinner that was for more than 20 people, then there is the person who invites for dinner, and then there are other people who cooking it. And not so in the case of Yehuda. Yehuda stood in the kitchen and cooked for over 20 people this dinner, And then I had this first impression of this very energetic person who is equally interested in science and art and all together, and that there are no such big borders between these fields.
He was cooking always for his students, for his friends. As a rector at the Free University, he made parties that he himself cooked and hosted the people. So that it was an extraordinary feature of Yehuda, that in addition to every area where he discovered we discovered his creativity as an educational leader, as an institution builder, as anything, as a man of ideas, he was also probably the best cook I ever met in my life. He could be a chef in the best restaurant in Paris or anywhere else.
Yehuda struck me immediately as an extraordinary person, somebody who was incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly sharp in his judgment, incredibly direct, incredibly open. I can only find lots of singularities to characterize him. And I think one characteristic thing about Yehuda is that all these qualities are present immediately.
His ability not only himself always to develop in a dynamic way, transfer to new fields of interest. In my life, I could see him, moving from real serious focused interest in science, in the history of science, in philosophy of science, to the domains of politics, ethics, social realities, and of course economics, globalization of knowledge in our days. So he's a person who would never, stand still in one place. He's always dynamic.
How could I define the relation between me and Yehuda? I think the kind of a core of it is some kind of intellectual mentorship. That he's teacher in many domains of life. What is an intellectual mentor? I think it's of course someone who teaches or shows the tools of thinking, the sources of knowledge, maybe also giving some examples of attitude of critical and maybe in Yehuda's case especially interdisciplinary thinking.
When I met Yehuda, I was pretty young, and I had not thought of being, for instance, eligible to something like the Wissenschaftskolleg, which is a very famous institution in Berlin. And so it happened to my friend Peter McLaughlin, who also had just finished his studies then. But Yehuda made it possible for both of us to come as very young fellows in this distinguished institution and to be elected. And Yehuda, I think that's characteristic of him. He always gave chances to young people.
I can't explain the unique possibility of Yehuda to find immediately the specific aspects of an individual and to judge him. When we had to select students, it was obvious. Part of it is because he refused to accept all the conventional ways of selection in the academy. He refused to accept people only because they had a wonderful curriculum vitae.
He had the capacity of selecting people that he thought had talent, had a special gift, and never mind where they came from, what their formal qualities were. He would just pick them and then persistently further them, support them, even if they didn't always believe in themselves.
We had as a family the great privilege to live together with Yehuda for almost 2 years, because we started to build a new house, and in order to do so we must put down the old one, so we had more or less no place to live, and in that time Yehuda decided to live more time in Berlin and was generous enough to invite us as a family, the whole family, to stay with him in his flat. So 2 very formative years also for my son, who was then a little bit more than 3 years old. We spent all together, my wife, my son, and Yehuda, and me, in the same flat. Normal, the need of an adult person is more in the silent direction, and the mood of my son, of my 3-year-old son, was playing around and so on. And surprisingly, they get along very, very well, and they managed to understand each other without words faster than it happened between adults.
I think that now that he's no longer with us, he left a big gap in the life of many people. But at the same time, he was such an energetic person that I also feel some of the energy that he left behind also is received by us.
So I hope that gives you some sense, not only who Yehuda was, but also the incredible impact he had on his friends and students and colleagues. Also gives you a sense, I think, of his love of life, his love of entertaining, food, and his engagement with the world. Next, we're going to hear a performance in honor of Yehuda Elkana of Yiddish protest songs by Isabel Frey, who is a scholar and activist and musician. And her new album is Millennial Buddhist. So welcome, Isabel, and we look forward to hearing your songs.
Thank you. It's a great honor to perform here today, also in honor of Yehuda, who I knew as a kid, actually, and as a teenager, right at the time when I was starting to get interested in the world. I remember that he for my bat mitzvah, he gave me the entire collection of Dostoevsky as a present, which is still in my bookshelf, reminding me of this time of starting to be interested in what the world has to offer intellectually and politically. And so these are still very valuable memories for me that I had of my teenage years, having known him and talked with him, and also felt that he believed in me, even just as a very young person, just starting to be interested in the world. So I would like to perform 2 Yiddish songs today, Yiddish protest songs past and future. I would like to start with a Yiddish protest song that is a partisan song written in the Vilna ghetto by Hirsch Glick, who was a poet and partisan fighter. And he wrote this song called Still die Nacht about another partisan fighter whose name was Witka Kempner. She was a partisan in one of the brigades of the Yiddish-speaking fighters against the Nazis, and was part of an action where they sabotaged the train tracks to block a weapon delivery by the Nazis. And so this is what the song is about, Still die Nacht. And it's especially beautiful because it ends with the verse saying, crawling out of the forest with snow in your hair, empowered from the small successes for a new and free generation. Still, die Nacht ist so ins Gestirn und der Frost hat gebrannt. Sie gedenkst du, wie ich hab dich gelernt, halten a Speier in die Hand. Am Moit a Pelzer na Beret und halt in Hand fest an a Gamm. Am Moit mit a Sommerkernem Bonin I toppe dem Säunes Karawan. Am Moit mit a Sommerkernem Bonin I toppe dem Säunes Karawan. Gezielt, geschossen, getroffen. Oh, dir kleinen Kerpistoi, an Neuto, a Fuhling geworfen, verhalten hat sie mit ein Keul, an Neuto, a Fuhling geworfen, verhalten hat sie mit ein Keul. Bartol vom Walderreus gekrochen, mit Schneegerlanden auf die Hohen, gemutigt von kleinen Zochen, war unser neuen freien Dorf, gemutigt von kleinen Zochen. Now I would like to perform a new Yiddish protest song that I set to music. It's a poem by a Yiddish revolutionary who migrated from Russia to the US. And he was not only a socialist who was active in the workers' movement, but he was also a poet who wrote very beautiful, lyrical Yiddish poetry. And this one is called In Vernacht. And it's basically about the need for utopia and the need to believe in something, to hope for something, and to trust in the times when we believe that a better future is possible. Morgen die Jahren, die Tag und die Wochen, Die Rede von Milch, dem Korn von Sand, uns schmeichelt das Leben, a Held von einem Nitzochen, was hat die Besiegte geklebt in Fang, uns schmeichelt das Leben, a Held von einem Nitzochen, was hat die Besiegte geklebt in Fang. Dort haben die Tage und die Wochen wie sangen, geblieben kein Chamor im Frühling das Feld, wenn's haben gebrächt und gesturmt verlangen, wenn's hat sich gefuhren der freiere Welt, wenn's haben gebrächt und gesturmt verlangen, wenn's hat sich gefuhren der freiere Welt. Sie haben geblieben vor der Welt und vor deres im Licht von dem Morgen, in Tee von Bagin. Doch was kennst du wel noch mehr wie die Peres, was du hast getragen von eigenem Min. Doch was kennst du wel noch mehr wie die Peres, was du hast getragen von eigenem Min. Verstillt ist die Regel des stummen Verlangen, das Herz ist beruhigt und weich der Gemüt und setzt heim dem goldenen Blick von die Sangen und setzt heim die Schönheit und Reifkeit von Schnee. Die Schönheit von Blick und die Reifkeit von a Jahr, a See ist gewählt und a See wird es sein, bis morgen die Rede von mir und dem Korn, war morgen, war später in der Sarai, bis morgen die Rede von mir und dem Korn, war morgen, war später in der Sarai.
I hope this is something that Yehuda would love, and I think it is. And now we're going to hear two personal reflections from two of his good friends and colleagues who were both intimately involved in this evening. The first is Yehuda Matai, the provost of CEU and the director of the Yehuda Elkana Center here at Central European University. Yehuda.
Thank you very much, Roger. It is good to see all of you on screen and even more in person. It's like a new experience to see people in a conference in a real setting. So this is an Elkana memorial. I thought I would talk about Yehuda not as the man, the person he was, but about how he is, currently, about his presence. And don't worry, I know that he left this university 12 years ago. He left this world altogether 9 years ago. I have no special channel of communication with him, so I know that all too well. But I think, Yehuda was such a special person when he was alive, and he remains special in his afterlife in a way. And I will try to illustrate that and explain, speaking about his influence today and perhaps even in the future on CEU as an institution, and on most, perhaps in a way, all of us who are working today at CEU. I know that sounds a little weird, a little paradoxical, and I'll go perhaps even farther than that, but I will try to talk about what is it that Yehuda is still influencing today at CEU, how, and what is the explanation for that? How does it happen? But before I start, and before I forget about that, because there was so much talk about Yehuda's passion for cooking for others, mainly for entertaining and also enjoying food. There was Roger mentioned this book, Yehuda's Tables. I need to correct you, Roger. This book was written for Yehuda, not by Yehuda, with some of his favorite recipes by great cooks, as good as Yehuda was, like my wife, for example. And all these recipes are not signed. There is only one thing in the book that is signed, the preface, which is written by someone who doesn't cook at all. Yours truly. And Yehuda actually enjoyed the book very much, but he has never written a book, a cookbook, if I remember well. So how is Yehuda present today at CEU? And I'm sure this is true for other institutions as well, but with which he was affiliated. But I would leave that to others. And I would just introduce this, and then I come back at the end and perhaps check whether I have enough evidence for two statements or two metaphors. So one metaphor to characterize his influence would be a biological one, the DNA. What is the DNA of this institution? And the other one would be more like a computer code. And I would say, and I mean it really, although these are metaphors, the DNA of this university is open society. It's a Soros DNA. So in that regard, CEU is a Soros university, no doubt about it. But if we talk about the code of the intellectual code as an institution today, if we talk about a little bit the social mind, if there was one at CEU, if I can use it, that is an Yehuda Elkana code, or it bears his signature. So in that regard, CEU is an Elkana university. Even today, I don't know for how long it would last, but it is an Yehuda Elkana university. I know this sounds very controversial. You may think I'm going too far, but I really mean it, and I will try to explain. So what do I mean by that? Well, several things. CEU today is what Yehuda made of it as an institution, a research-intensive university. It was not when he came. This is what he programmatically made out of CEU, transformed the university from a good university that it was before into a research-intensive university. It is also very much in our code today that we are about social sciences and humanities, and about the two together, which was not exactly clear before Yehuda started here. But I can talk a lot about that. By research-intensive university, Yehuda meant, for example, that we need to have teaching civic commitment based on rigorous research, one that would combine the social sciences and humanities. We are also today a global university. if a global university can exist as a matter of fact, which was not the case before Yehuda. So Yehuda was the one who introduced then the phrase at CU, going global. And going global, he means expanding the scope of recruitment. Before his time, we basically had students only from Central and Eastern Europe. Now he opened up recruitment to students from everywhere. He insisted on hiring faculty members from everywhere in the world, and he also insisted on changing the curriculum and making it different in any case than a regional curriculum or fundamentally regional curriculum. So these are things that he started and still happen today, more or less the way he imagined it. So he, in that regard, he is very present today. Now, also, I would like to say that the most recent kind of intellectual developments at CEU were started by Yehuda or prepared by Yehuda. There is very little new that we have done after he left CEU. And we had the Department of Philosophy, for example. It's something that he insisted on creating, the Department of Sociology and Social Anthropology. The Institute of Advanced Studies at CEU was created just after his departure, but it was initiated by Yehuda as well. And I can go through a long list. The Department of Network Science. It is something that he incubated. We are very proud. We have the only PhD in network science in Europe, one of the 3 in the world, unless they changed recently. And they are recent, but they were started by Yehuda. So I would say the only really new thing that was not here when Yehuda was here are the undergraduate programs. And this is also very interesting because Yehuda wrote a lot about undergraduate education, more than about graduate education, and he would have loved to have a chance to create or transform or be part of an undergraduate education program. I mean, he did not anticipate that we will be here one day, and primarily for accreditation reasons, we will have to start an undergraduate program. But we might go back to his ideas about undergraduate programs at CEU at some point. That would be very interesting. So this is another, I know, especially for my colleagues at CEU, a very strong statement. There is very little new at CEU intellectually, academically, that started without Yehuda or after Yehuda. Now, we are here in the context of OSUN, the Open Society University Network. It was also his idea. And it is only fitting that he is celebrated by OSUN through the creation of an Yehuda Elkana Prize. Why did he think about such an idea? Because he thought it is actually not possible to have a single university as a global university, let alone CEU. CEU is too small to be global, so the only chance of being global is through a network, being a network university with legs in many parts of the world. But this is not only about geography, it is also about the intellectual and the academic issues. So the Open Society University Network was announced last year by Mr. Soros. It is very new. It emerged formally, I don't know, many years after Yehuda's death, but he was at the very beginning when this discussion started. And I don't want to go through the history of OSUN. The idea was nicely developed, written down in position papers, then buried many times, then resuscitated again. I personally lost hope. I was convinced it would never happen. I was surprised when, in the end, Mr. Soros announced it last year in Davos. Now, as you can see a little bit in all these things, there is always something controversial, or I don't know, unorthodox is not a good term for that. But Yehuda wanted to create a department of sociology and social anthropology. that is still something that we debate at CEU. He wanted to have a department of mathematics and applications of mathematics, and we created it. And by this, his thinking was that a university in the social sciences and humanities needs mathematics, but as much as possible working together with the social sciences and humanities in applications. That didn't work in the end. It failed. And Yehuda was very much for taking intellectual risk, which means occasionally you fail. But it's very interesting because the network science department became a little bit what the Department of Mathematics and Applications of Mathematics was supposed to be. So this is also something that we have in our code today. The idea that we are, as a university, about taking risk, intellectual risk, and I can perhaps give other examples as well. Now, what is also interesting, talking about Yehuda's influence and Yehuda's presence at CEU until today, is that very often, because this is a code, right? If I can stretch this metaphor a little bit, many of us don't know where the code is or where the ideas are coming from. And I'll give you one example. A few years ago, I had the idea of a global teaching fellowship program. And my own thinking was, this was long before we started the undergraduate programs, we have a very good PhD program. Most of our PhD students will become academics. They will teach, but they learn nothing about teaching while they are here. They cannot practice teaching because we don't have undergraduate programs, right? And we were in Hungary, teaching in Hungarian universities in Hungarian was impossible, in English very restricted. So why don't we imagine a program whereby our advanced PhD students and perhaps recent doctoral graduates will go in the world and teach for a full semester or a full year in Myanmar, in Palestine, in other parts of the world, and they learn about teaching by themselves with a little preparation. They learn about the world. It might also be linked with their own research, and we did it. We found money. Now it's being taken over by Osun and emulated by other institutions, Yanspo, Arizona State University. It works and it's beautiful, and I was so proud of it until one of the colleagues, I'm still proud, but I had a discussion with one of the colleagues who are working in this program who said, why are you saying that this was your idea? It was Yehuda's idea. Oh, come on, I said, cannot be. Yes, well, he didn't say it as such, didn't call it Global Teaching Fellowship Program, didn't say you should send students to teach in Palestine and Myanmar and Central Asia and Latin America. But he said, we need to find a way to have our PhD students learning about teaching, and this cannot be done at CEU, and you should imagine partnership. I probably have forgotten about that the discussion. She must have been present, and there are many other things that I can mention like that, which I am proud of having imagined them, discovered. Others are, and they go back to that man, and to what I call this code that he wrote. Now I haven't even checked the time at the beginning. I'm always intimidated speaking in Yehuda's presence, let alone about Yehuda's presence. And I was told that I can talk for 20 minutes, then it was changed to 40 minutes, then it went back. So I should cut it. But how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to add example like this. But I'm not going to go all the way there. Just one other dimension of this entire story about the social mind, the code, the software for the social mind at CEU. And social mind is, by the way, another unit that we have at CEU, which was not created by Yehuda but inspired by Yehuda. I think it's actually the only one of its kind in the world. There is another social mind center, but that means something different. So this is about a different dimension. It's about principles, about values, about moral references. I think it was probably my last discussion with Yehuda before he left CEU. So we met after that, and we we were starting at that time to think about a new campus in Budapest. None of us dreamt about having to move out of Hungary. And we discussed about options, real estates, and he asked me out of the blue in that discussion, what do you think is the most important thing in a university? I said, well, what are we talking about? Ideas, of course. So what else can be? We are a university, it's about ideas. And he says, you're wrong. And I'm going to tell you something that you will not agree to, you will not believe me, you will not trust me, but one day you will realize that I'm right. And he says in a university, the most important thing is the people of the university. And I thought over the years, it still didn't make sense to me, to be honest, until we had to move from Budapest. And you all know, we lamented, we fought academic freedom, principles, human rights, democracy, and very often we forgot about the fact that we had a couple thousand people, more if we count families, 4,000 people, 5,000 people, I calculated at some point, who had to move from one country to another, from one language to another, leaving old parents behind, leaving, I don't know, playgrounds behind in the case of kids. And we didn't quite look at that dimension, you know, the human dimension of academic freedom, the fight for academic freedom, the need to protect academic freedom. And, you know, that made me kind of realize, at least in part, I believe, what he meant by people being, well, now I would say at least as important as ideas, if not most important. And I kind of took it upon myself to, you know, draw attention to people in this crisis as well, not only to accreditation, real estate, curricula, and so on. To what extent I succeeded, I don't know. But this is also, I think, something that speaks for Yehuda's influence and Yehuda's presence. So I will really stop here. You know, there is this film director, Almodovar, you will know about it, who made films about dreams. And at some point for one film, the producer is telling him the film is too short. Doesn't matter, we add another dream or two. So, you know, I have no dream, no more examples to add, but I really believe that Yehuda's presence is very strong and very real, whether you accept my code metaphor or not. I don't know for how long it will last. I think it will last for long. And I would like to end by thanking Ivan, Shalini, and Roger for the idea of the prize and of this commemoration. I do think Yehuda would have enjoyed it. I would also like to thank Helga for accepting to be the first recipient of this award. There's no better way to start than to honor both you and Yehuda. And I would also like to thank Osun for kind of acknowledging one of the founding figures of this weird enterprise. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deview. Just the perfect amount of dreams that you told. And now we have another film director who's going to offer a few reflections on Yehuda beyond those that were in the film that she made, Helga Nowotny.
Thank you very much. I don't see myself as a film director. It was done for Yehuda. But I feel emotionally very touched because I'm standing here in front of you. It is an award in Yehuda's name, and yet Yehuda is not with us. He would have liked to be here. He would have liked to meet all of you, those he knows and has worked with, and those he does not yet know. Because this was his extraordinary gift for friendship. And he opened up to people. He was curious, he was warm-hearted. He took them into his arms, literally. That surprised many people when they met him for the first time. And he radiated this energy that I also mentioned in the film. And it was an energy that had an intellectual side to it, nourished by his extremely wide and deep knowledge of many different fields. It was, as has been mentioned, science, the history of science, which was his own field of competence and expertise. But it ranged to political science, to math, to network science. It ranged to literature, the arts, music. And he surprised many of us, coming up with, a new book that hardly anyone knew about. And he said, you have to read this. He came up with new musical pieces that were performed by musicians, some were known, some were not known, saying, you have to listen to that. This is extraordinary. And he could explain and convey to you why he thought this was different and something very special. But this energy that he radiated also had another side. And this was the side of doing things, of not accepting the world as it is, of not taking things for given as they are, but questioning them. And as Isabel, with her partisan songs and this idea and nostalgia for utopia, it was there as well, not accepting as the world as it is. Now, apart from this surprising ability that he had to draw us into his sources of energy, he was also skeptical towards himself. And at his gravestone, he's buried in a kibbutz in the Negev desert. He wanted to have Montaigne's leitmotif, que sais-je, what do I know, inscribed on his gravestone. And this is also part of Yehuda, this question, what do I know, given the immensity of the world of knowledge, this space of knowledge of what is possible. Now, Livio and Roger mentioned, Livio gave us, I think, a very vivid description of what Yehuda did for this university here. I shared years with Yehuda at ETH Zurich, and as we jokingly said, we shared a chair but not a bed. And we had a joint professorship. We visited each other twice during the semester of each other. And although we differed in style in dealing with our students and in the way how we went about, but nevertheless, we had the same kind of program. So I will not go into these years teaching and researching with Yehuda. But I want to leave one thought with you. If you press me, what is the quality? Just as Livio said, there's the code. If you press me, what is the quality that perhaps today is more important than ever? I would use the Greek term parousia. And it's usually translated as the ability to speak frankly and boldly. And everyone who met Yehuda knows he spoke boldly and frankly. And I think in the time in which we live today, where we are inundated with fake news, conspiracy theories, where science is by some people degraded to a mere subjective opinion, where expertise is being ridiculed as having no basis whatsoever, I wonder what Yehuda would have done and would have said. And I think he would have stood up and spoke very frankly and boldly. And he would have told us that there is the need to speak and to act to rethink the Enlightenment, for instance. This would have been one of his projects right now. But above all, to share the belief that it can be otherwise. Thank you.